I became that way. I became one of those type people, like very condescending, looking down on other people. Anybody who wasn't doing what I was trying to do in life, they were losers. It's a period in my life that took me like more than a decade to recover from. My name is Sean, and nearing about 20 years ago, starting in 2000, well, actually 20 years ago, starting in 2005, I joined my first MLM, had a few different stints in MLM, joined a couple of them, um, learned some things along the way, and I'm here to share my story.
Let's start with what company was the first
Yeah,
one that you were in?
it was called Prepaid Legal.
I know it well.
So the backstory on that. Okay, so in 2005, I moved out here. I live in Atlanta. Moved out here 2005. I was 20 years old, and so I got a job with with this mobile detail shop, right? For a car auction. Now, that was pretty hard labor, man. The car auction, that was hard labor. I mean, it's one of them kind of jobs where it's like the people who work there are like having conversations about, one of these days I'm gonna leave this company, I'm gonna find me something better, or I'm going to school to do something with one of those kind of jobs. So one day I noticed that like there was this book making the rounds, like a lot of the people around the workplace was reading. The book was Rich Dad Poor Dad. And so, and so there was a coworker, somebody I respected. Um, this guy had to have been like in his late 30s, early 40s. And so you know how it goes when, all of a sudden they become financial experts and they know all the ins and outs of money, and, your job becomes the worst thing in the world, and, that sort of thing. So he had just joined Prepaid Legal shortly before that. And he began telling me about it and whatnot. And I was intrigued, because, up until that time, I had never thought about, owning my own business or anything like that. Um, my life goal at that time was, I'm like, look, I want to go back to school, get a degree in graphic design, and, get a job doing that. And at the most, freelance for myself. But this idea of making money and how they put it, money working for you, that was intriguing. So after me and him talked about the prepaid legal thing, he took me to, well, he introduced me to his upline, right? And so because the guy who would become my upline, he was still relatively new. So he introduced me to his upline who did the talking, and we did the sign up process and whatnot. And a quick story about his upline, by the way. Now, I will give him credit. He did do MLM full time, but knowing what I know now, this guy, he got into a one in a lifetime type situation where, like, I think he said like when he first joined, like he managed to talk like some factory or something into, letting him pitch it, and like maybe 500 people signed up on the spot or something under him. So to me, that looked credible. I'm like, man, you're doing this full time? Like, you're not just talking? Okay, they'll sign me up. Now, mind you, now around this time, I didn't even know what it was called. I didn't even know what kind of business I was in. Like, I just knew, I believe in this product, legal services and, identity theft protection. Because back then, it wasn't like it is now where you can go on Google and like, um, Google, and get answers for like a lot of your legal questions or just generic legal advice. It wasn't like that back then. And that's what the company offers. But anyways, so, I went out, tried to sell it, tried to sign people up. The first person I tried to sign up was my neighbor, my next door neighbor. He was a guy like in his mid to late 30s. So I tell him, I'm like, hey man, I just signed up to this company. I want to introduce you to what I'm doing, get you on board. And his first response to me was, he was like, man, well, excuse my language, ahead of time. He was like, man, you the one that got yourself involved in a goddamn pyramid scheme. I was like, what? A pyramid scheme? Now, mind you, I had never heard the term pyramid scheme before then, but the way he was saying it, I knew it had to be bad. So if it was a bad thing that was going to cause you not to sign up, then that's not what this is. It's not a pyramid, right? So I'm like, no, this is not a pyramid scheme, man. No. It's not. It's a business. It's a business. He's like, no, it's a pyramid scheme. Like, no, like, he's like, man, get out while you can, man. Get out. Like, all right, man. Like, move on from that. So, I mean, feel free to stop me anytime.
Yeah, I want to jump in real quick because I want to just give the people watching a little background. So explain exactly what prepaid legal was. We know it's an MLM. Now they're called Legal Shield because I mean, I'm speculating here. I don't know of an official source or statement that said this was the reason, but I suspect that a large reason as to why prepaid legal shifted or rather rebranded to Legal Shield was because the infamous murderer Jodi Arias was a distributor in prepaid legal, and her upline Travis was the boyfriend that she killed. But this is rarely ever mentioned, or it's just quickly passed by or quickly mentioned and then moved on in the documentaries about Jodi Arias. And I think prepaid legal definitely played a bigger role in that situation than any of the other publications on Jodi Arias have talked about. But it might sound confusing. Legal services, MLM, you were just 20 years old. So explain what it is that you're selling, because you're obviously not a lawyer. Like, you didn't go to school for years and now you work for a legal firm or a legal company. So how are you selling legal services? So explain what it was actually that they sold.
So from the little bit I did understand, well, like I said earlier, the idea was that you have access to lawyers, like actual licensed attorneys. You can call in and ask them for legal advice, for a monthly fee. And they also had, I forgot exactly what they called it, but it was basically identity theft protection. They had that. But like I said, but nowadays, I mean, this was before Google was what it was, so the level of legal advice they would offer you is something that you can Google yourself nowadays, really. I mean, it was nothing special, but that was the gist of it. But, I thought that was pretty cool. But
yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting thing, even for that time, too, even pre-ChatGPT, where you could ask, legal questions. I mean, it just seems so silly because why would lawyers are already expensive, right? So you're telling me that as a customer, I'm going to pay monthly to get legal advice, I guess, which its value would be limited to begin with, because what am I getting legal advice on? Like civil matters, custody, things where I'm representing myself, but I just wanted like some guidance from an actual lawyer. Why would I pay to talk to a lawyer that's not my lawyer? At that point, I might as well just hire my own lawyer, I would think. I don't see how it's actually like saving anybody any money or like providing anybody any value. Like, if you can't afford a lawyer for like a civil matter where you wouldn't get like a public defender appointed to you, then you can't afford it. So then you're telling me you have, and again, I don't know how much the cost was, so maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's like, oh, it was only $50 a month, and that's why people are like, okay, I'll take it. But I don't know.
$10.
$10?
$10 a month, I think.
Oh, never mind then. Never mind. I'll pay $10 a month for that.
So it's one of those things where, when you look back at it, it wasn't really about the service per se. It was really about, signing people up. So the business side, I mean, the service didn't really have to make sense, to be honest with you, looking back at it.
Okay, so go on. So you tried to recruit the first guy you tried to recruit told you it's a pyramid scheme. And then what happened after that? You stuck to it, or you moved on immediately?
Oh, no, I stuck to it, because, oh man. So I read The Rich Dad. Well, actually, no, I read like maybe the first chapter of it, before, but first chapter or so of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's like, okay, you know what? All right. But, talking to my coworkers in my upline who put me, who signed me up to it, I'm listening to these guys, and it becomes a whole conversation about, yeah, man, rich people do this, rich people do that. And so with the whole MLM thing, this is your business and this is what rich people do. At that time, I had a thing where, mentally it's like I took a lot of things quite literal, right? So when you say, okay, this type of business, in this case being MLM, this is what rich people do, I believed you, So one of the first things I did was I drove to an affluent side of town, went to this shopping plaza, like one of those outdoor shopping plazas. And I really set up a booth outside, like, I forgot what store it was, but set up a booth outside of their store and, handing out brochures to people who walk past and cards and everything. And to be honest with you, man, I'm surprised that store let me get away with that. I'm surprised. Like, I'm surprised they didn't tell me, like, hey, you can't be here, man.
Yeah.
But they let me do it, so I did that several times. And we used to have a thing as well where we used to go to job fairs, for some of the younger people. I mean, I don't know if they still do job fairs now, but it was basically, somebody may rent some hotel space or something, and lots of companies show up. People show up to fill out applications and stuff, and that's pretty much the gist of it.
Right.
So we would show up there and like be in the parking lot handing out business cards, trying to sign them up. And so after a while, doing this for like a year and some change, I never did sign anybody up. And so it pretty much fell off. And one thing that I remember that stood out to me, looking back at it now, and I'm like, man, what the hell was wrong with you? But yeah, one of the things that let me know that, looking back at it now, that I took it too far was that I mentioned that I moved out here in 2005 to Atlanta. I moved out here from Louisiana. And so I moved out here actually a month before Hurricane Katrina struck. The crazy thing is this, man. So, okay, Hurricane Katrina hits, and like there's a buddy of mine. Like I said, I left a month before it happened. He evacuated when they got the evacuation notice, but nevertheless, he still lost everything, like when he got back. So, oh boy, this is gonna sound crazy. But when he made it back to New Orleans, I actually called him and tried to sign him up for this. Like I tried to tell him, like, hey man, you sign up with this, man, come on out here and you grind with me, you can get it all back. Now looking back at it now, man, I'm like, man, what the
damn.
Like, man, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. No, for real.
So, like I said, about, eventually, it just pretty much faded away. It's like, okay, you know what? I'm done. This isn't going to work. So I was done with prepaid legal, whatever.
So then after you finished with prepaid legal, from the sounds of it, it seems like it's something that you came to realize on your own. But did you have like pushback from your upline or other people on the supposed team that were trying to like talk you out of, quitting, giving up on your dream?
My upline himself, there was no pushback from him, but there was some pushback from his upline. Like, man, why are you giving up, man? You're quitting so easily, et cetera, et cetera. Now, see, the thing I'll say is that like the crazy stuff that happened, eventually didn't come from this particular stint, in prepaid legal. Like a lot of, like the stuff that you guys talk about, I experienced that stuff later on, which, like I said, we'll get to that. But yeah, like this time, just from his upline, just, trying to talk me into going along with it, because even my upline himself had kind of like, distanced himself a little bit from it. I mean, he was still involved, but he wasn't pushing it the way he was before, because like me and him, we really thought we were going to be rich from this.
Right.
Like we really thought.
Okay. That's good. That's good that they didn't try to like, manipulate you back into doing it longer, wasting more time on it. Okay, so then you're still working, thankfully, which I'm glad to hear that you were still working to support yourself during this time. And you were also young. You said you're 20, you moved to Atlanta. It's in the middle of a crazy time, and I don't know if you had family out there and whatnot, but you don't need to get into that. But what was okay, good. So what was the next situation that you found yourself getting into, which now in hindsight you realize, oh, that was also multi-level marketing?
Okay, prepaid legal. Now I ended that around, like I said, 2000 and mid 2006, 2007. So it was like maybe like a 2-year stretch, year and a half, whatever. So 2008, I'm working a different job this time, and so I go to this seminar and I meet a guy. We chat briefly. He tells me that he's in the real estate business. Older guy in his 50s. Like, okay, he's in the real estate business, legitimate guy. And we exchanged information and began chatting, basically asking me my life goals. And I found out some things about him. Everything's all fine. Until one day I get a phone call from him. And let me digress for a moment and say this. Shortly before I met this guy, this is when I got into self-help material. I began to read, your Think and Grow Riches, and all the classical stuff. Yeah, so that's a key part of it. I got into self-help around this time before I met this guy. So, okay, so he called me one day. He was like, "Hey, I have a business opportunity. I want you to come and check out." I was like, "Oh yeah, what is it?" He's like, "There's this millionaire who's going to be speaking, and I really want you to come and hear him speak." I was like, "There's going to be, a millionaire speaking? Like, I'm going, I'm like, tell me the date, the time, and hey, I'm going to be there." Okay, so that happened. That happened, right? And so the day come. I mean, I look, man, I went and bought a suit and everything, man. So because I'm
Oh
thinking this is
no.
gonna be a legit business meeting, man. A legit business meeting. I'm like, this is a real estate guy, so this is this is serious business.
And did you meet this?
So,
Did you meet this real estate guy at one of these self-help? It was like, I'm guessing the seminar was a self-help seminar.
it wasn't a self-help seminar, but it was I forgot what it was, but it was an actual business. I think it was like an internet marketing seminar or something,
Okay.
which was like really hot at that time. But yeah, so I show up at the meeting he tells me about. And by the way, this was show up to the millionaires meeting. And by the way, this was actually pretty genius. This was pretty genius. I will give this guy this, the millionaire, by the way. So it's not like a some commercial building or hotel where he had it. He had it at his house, which was like in this affluent side of town, gated community where they had mansions and stuff. And as a matter of fact, it's most known because the actor Chris Tucker used to live in that neighborhood. So it was known for that reason. So it's a mansion. All right, so we pull up to it, and the way he had it set up was like the meeting was held like in the media room of his house, because you know how some people have the house where they got like the movie theater seats and the big screen and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's where the meeting was held. But the way that you get to that room was like you park in the driveway, and he wanted you to walk through the garage, right, to get to that room. And in the garage, you see the Rolls Royce, you see the Lambo, you see the Ferrari and all that stuff. You see that on your way to that room, right? So it's like, you go in there, you get seated and stuff. And when he began talking, he starts pitching this MLM called Monavi.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, called Monavi. So I'm like, man, this man had brought me to an MLM meeting. Well, back then, but then again, I didn't know that it was called MLM, because even though I had done prepaid legal, I didn't really know much about the business itself or whatever. I didn't, to me, that just kind of just came and went, but I didn't really know like a lot of, the ins and outs of the MLM and stuff. Didn't even know it was called MLM. But anyway, so listen to him. And I mean, the guy, he really was a millionaire. But he told his backstory though, which was that he actually made his money in a different MLM called Noni Juice, which was popular at that time. So he said he made like $10 million in Noni Juice, but mostly from being a high-ranking executive in the company, like, not from selling, but as being like one of the, I guess like next to the CEO or something like that, right?
Early members.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, he was given the impression that he made his money from Monavi, So for that reason, it was easier for him to sell. But anyway, so I mean, I saw all that. I see the Rolls Royce, the house, the car. Like sign me up. And so from there, I mean, this is where it's a period in my life that took me like more than a decade to recover from.
Damn.
At from this point.
And sorry, tell the people what does Monavi sell?
Okay, let me see if I can remember this, because this was around 2008. Monavi was supposed to be like this juice made from what they call the acai berry, supposed to be some magic berry or something. Yeah, so he tells his backstory about how he made his money, which the sum and substance was that he made $10 million from the Noni Juice MLM. But like I said, he was a high-ranking executive within the company. But I don't know if he made that as a distributor or not, though. But he definitely had the money to show. I'll give him that. But it was kind of giving the illusion that he made it from Monavi, which of course made it easier for him to make money from Mona V because he had the image to sell. So, yeah, eventually I signed up, got on board with it because the aesthetics, got to me. And like I said, that's when the subsequent events, like caused me a lot of pain and suffering. It took me like about a decade or better to shake back from it. So, like I said, I began to get into a lot of the self-help material. And, a short story on that. The way I got into the self-help material was I didn't realize it, but this speaker that I was listening to, I used to listen to like a lot of his audios about health and stuff. And then eventually he started producing material about self-help and would recommend different books to read and so forth. So I began to read that stuff. And then I developed like what I refer to as an MLM state of mind. So this is where, the MLM state of mind is basically a very condescending mindset where you look down on people who don't, who are not doing what you're doing, people who don't view the world the way that you view it, people who work jobs, just people who are not on this whole quote, self-improvement thing and so on, right? So I became that way, I became one of those type people, like very condescending, looking down on other people, like, that kind of thing. Anybody who wasn't doing what I was trying to do in life, they were losers. Anyone who tried to warn me or whatever, who tried to talk rationally to me, they were just being negative. Y'all are always gonna be broke. Y'all are always gonna be losers, And so I was thinking like that, after I started consuming a lot of that material and started listening to these people. Because what I didn't know about some of these people, some of these people's material I was consuming, I didn't know that they were MLM people themselves. That's what I didn't know. I thought they were legitimate entrepreneurs. So, and so now fast forward to me being in Monavie. Now that same attitude, it caused me to lose many, like lose a few friends. It caused me to, lose a few family members. But what I will say is that thankfully, I was able to, go back and, repair some of those relationships. Once I finally got my head right, thankfully those weren't broken permanently.
One thing about this pitch meeting that you've described is it's such a cookie cutter, copy paste example of one of these MLM pitch meetings. It's like the nice house, the rich neighborhood, the cars. It's like, I just have to, my gut always tells me that those are fake. Like maybe that guy did actually make $10 million. Maybe he made 1 million and he's embellishing it times 10. But I don't know. I just feel like, one, if you're actually rich, why do you need me, some 20-year-old kid in your case, or 21-year-old kid? And two, like, if you're actually a rich guy and you have these cars in the garage, I don't want people walking through the garage to come into my house, a bunch of strangers I don't know. Somebody's going to scuff it. Somebody's going to put their hands on it. Somebody's going to like act a fool and scrape against it or something. Like, I don't want anything like that. So the fact that it was set up for people to go through the garage to begin with, and not the rest of the house. It just reminds me so much of Nathan from my ACN video, who like we're in his penthouse and he made sure to let us know like, welcome to my place. And like, I'm Nathan and I'm a rich guy from this company. And it's like, I don't know, bro, you're just a bullshitter to me. And I guess, I don't know if you now looking back feel that about that guy, that he was probably just bullshitting the whole time, but that's my guess.
Yeah, probably. But see, one thing I'll say is that knowing how people fake it, which eventually I found out in a major way, I had no idea about that back then. I thought that a lot of the people who, displayed certain lifestyles or who made certain claims, I thought, okay, why would they lie about that? Like that's what I was thinking back then. And like even with a lot of the self-help authors and business gurus and stuff, like when I would read their material, I'm like, surely like somebody has to screen you to make sure that you are who you say you are before you write a book on business and money, right? Like, so if you were lying, They wouldn't let you do it. So, it's kind of laughable how wrong that is, but but that's what I thought back then. So yeah, I guess I was easy to get though.
It's okay. You were a kid as well. It's like,
But yeah, but once I signed up for the Mona V thing, man, like I said, now I'm in this MLM mindset, now I got that going on and stuff. And so I go out there, start pitching it very hard, pouring money into it. And now this is when I realized the cult aspect of MLM. Because before I didn't really know a whole lot about MLM itself or even what the concept really was. But now I started figuring it out, But at this time, it's important to note that at this time, I didn't see it as a cult. I just saw it as, what they call it, your mastermind, and you got to be around quote like-minded people. And by the way, that phrase like-minded people, it sounds good, but listening to it now, it sounds very cultish. It sounds very groupthink, but I digress. But so I'm pounding the pavement, trying to sell it, pouring money into it. And if I had to guess, man, I probably poured about $5,000 into it. Don't sound like a lot, but the year is 2008. I'm probably making 25,000 a year, So for me, that was a significant sum of money. And at this time, I'm still working now. I'm still working. So the downside was that, let me see. At this time, I'm like 23 years old. I have a job, have a car, have an apartment. Things are going pretty good. But I had somehow allowed like the uplines and everyone else to convince me that my life was horrible. Like, you need to do better, man. Like, do you really want to live like this? Working a job, working for somebody else? Like, do you really want to live like that? So
it's insane.
So I became convinced, oh man, my life is horrible, man. I can do better than this. Like, I can't live like this. So, I started taking this attitude, where I didn't take my job seriously. And, like I said, I looked down on people who didn't have the same, goals and aspirations as me. And I surely looked down on the people who wouldn't join what I was doing, which, like I said, caused me to alienate, many good people, family and friends alike. And so that attitude towards my job, and then also trying to recruit people on the job and stuff. Now the year is 2008, the year we had the financial crisis. So when they did a head count, guess what happened to me? I was let go. I was let go. And so it became rough to find another job, but at the same time, I wasn't really looking for another job per se, because now I'm like, you know what? Now I'm gonna make this ML, I'm gonna make this Monavi thing work. I'm like, because maybe me losing my job was a blessing. Maybe it was a sign that I need to go all in, and make this Monavi thing work.
Right.
Because if I would have still had my job, then that would have been holding me back. And yeah. So
and I'm sure they use that too, to be like, see?
Exactly. Because, man, the kind of stuff that I used to get asked to do sometimes, man, because like I used to work the early shift. I used to go in at 4:00 in the morning, and I used to get asked to come to meetings that would start at like 11 or 12 o'clock midnight and stuff. Now what kind of business meeting starts at those times? But anyways, I would get asked to come to those and, come to this or fork out money for this and that or whatever, so I was losing money left and right, really. And like I said, being asked to engage in, a very cultish mindset, going to this meeting, that meeting, and, getting on this call, that call. And so I devoted a lot of time to doing this, but I mean, I signed a couple of folks up or whatever, but nothing near that would allow me to recoup what I had put into it though. So like I said, lost my job, which eventually led to me, losing my apartment, losing my car. And yeah, but I did receive unemployment for a while. And I mean, that kept me, above water, I guess. But guess where a lot of that was going?
Yep.
I mean, it sounds stupid as I'm repeating this to you now, because this is the first time I'm going like, step by step by what happened during this period. But this sounds stupid as I'm saying it, man. But if it can help somebody, then hey, because I'm constantly being told by my uplines and stuff like, hey man, hey, you got to spend money to make money. You know what I'm saying? Like, Scared money don't make money. That's what you gotta do. So, all right. Eventually, give it like, I think I spent like 3 years in that one before I finally just said, you know what, forget it. Because by this point, I had nothing. I think I had $2 in the bank, and I no longer had a car, no longer had my own apartment. The only reason I wasn't on the street is because I had a family member who let me live with them. So there was that before I finally walked away from it. Like, you know what? Okay, that's enough. And so that was the end of the Monavie venture.
I mean, I'm sure those people would have told you like, oh well, it wasn't us that caused you to lose money. It was you lost your job, which is what caused you to lose it. But ironically, it's the same people that were putting this into your head that like, fuck the job. The job is the worst thing. You need to be doing this. And like, isn't that the whole thing? Like, go back 3 years to the time you went to the garage at the dude's house or whatever. It's like, presumably I'm here to get what you have, to the guy, right? How come 3 years go by and I still
Exactly.
don't have that? You always find the same thing. I've done how many of these interviews now? It was their fault. They shouldn't have had that job. They should have gone 100%. They should have gone all in. They didn't choose in their mind to become the main character and step into their power and take massive action and all the bullshit, isms that they say. So I wonder, was this a bit different than prepaid legal, where after you decided, all right, I'm out of this, that they did try to put that sort of guilt back on you and say like, Sean, this is your fumble, basically.
Oh, yes, indeed. Now, see, like I said, this is where I began to see how things, really work in the MLM, like the cult aspect of it. Because not only was it my upline, but it was like other people in the business. Now the difference between my prepaid legal stint and the Monavie stint was like, now social media was around. So now we have Facebook, which was the predominant one around that time. So around 2005, we had MySpace, but now we got Facebook, which is how I connected with a lot of my Monavie associates. And so now it's like, oh man, you're a quitter, man. You're a loser. Go back and find you a job, a job. Go get you a just over broke. You never amount to nothing. That kind of stuff. Now, granted, this was mostly from people. We had the Facebook groups where we networked. It was that kind of communication. It wasn't to my face, but still, nevertheless, it was still said. And it was one of those things where you see like how when you're in the business, it's all love, but the moment you say, you know what, it's not for me, it's not working, then you find out how they really feel about you. Because like you said, it turns into a whole lot of, well, with me, it was like, oh man, you didn't put in the work, man. You didn't do this. You didn't, you could have done this better. You could have done that better. I'm like, man, look, I've done everything I can except for grabbing these people's hands and forcing them to sign the paperwork. Like, I did what I could. So,
yep, that's a game you'll never win, bro. That's a game you'll never win. Either you did everything perfect and it's just a matter of time. You just need to keep going at it. And if you quit, it's because you didn't go at it long enough. They'll use the image of like, that meme of like the guy mining for diamonds. And on the top, he's like turning around. He's turning his back. But on the bottom, it's like, if you just went a little bit longer, either you didn't do it long enough, you were doing everything perfect and you didn't do it long enough, or you didn't do everything perfect. But it's never them. It's never that it's impossible. The promise was impossible to begin with, which would require them admitting what they're doing. And yeah, also you mentioned too, the people talking bad about you. Honestly, bro, even if you didn't know for a fact that it was happening, you still knew it was happening. You still knew they were thinking it, even if they weren't saying it, because you're now with this group of like-minded people and they're thinking the same way you were thinking, which is, you described it perfectly before, that you get sort of this like condescending attitude where you look at other people as losers because they're not hip to the same knowledge that you are. They're not on this same path. It makes you have this like superiority complex. So even if you didn't know verifiably that the people around you at that time were saying it, you could reasonably, guess that they were thinking it because you were thinking it and you were all thinking it together about other people, but now you're other people. So it's very much the us versus them cult mentality. And you're absolutely right in using that word to describe it. But go ahead. I don't want to drone on it.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm probably downplaying like how bad things really were, but let's just say that some more harsher things were said that I probably can't repeat here though, to the point where it's like some people who were, it's like I've met them in person before at different events that we would hold. As a matter of fact, the story with the millionaire guy, that story is not done because I recall one event where he rented out this hotel by the airport. I mean, for a networking event, we all meet up and like those MLM events they have where everyone meets up and it's really just one huge circle jerk, maybe, right? And
Yep.
people gets paraded across the stage and stuff. You know, one of those kind of events. So he shows off a check, where his commission was like 50,000 for the previous month and stuff. And we're all like, man, we're gonna be like him. That's gonna be us one day. So a lot of the people in the Facebook group who were talking crazy, I've met them in person before. And let's just say it got so bad to where I'm like, look, dude, we can meet up again. I won't say what for, but we can meet up again, and shake hands, shake hands, you know, you know, you know.
Let's run it.
So yeah, I mean, it was that bad, man. So yeah. So eventually I left, got me another just over broke, became a wage slave and
Yep.
making other people rich, So so I started doing that again, right? But you know what, man? A strange thing when I did that though. I actually made some money and got back on my feet. Can't believe it. But yeah, I made money and got back on my feet, another car, another apartment, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Now, but see, at the same time, it's like now I realize I'm like, you know what, this industry, can't do it. I realize that, it's a scam, can't do it. That's how I'm thinking. But the problem was I was still ridiculously invested in self-help material. I was still drinking that Kool-Aid heavily, the self-help stuff. So I still had goals of, financial freedom and all that good stuff. So the fact that I'm still into the self-help stuff, I'm like, you know what, man, but I'm still not satisfied though, man. I'm still not, I can do better still. So you fast forward to like maybe 2012 or so. I'm like, you know what, man? The reason why the prepaid legal thing didn't work, the reason why the Monavie thing didn't work is because you didn't give it your all. All right. You didn't give it your all, man. I mean, you could have did this, you could have been doing that, and it would have worked, man. But you know what? We're gonna try it again. We're gonna try it again. So, man, that sounds stupid. But anyways, so I'm like, yeah, we're gonna sign up one more time, sign up again, and this time it's gonna work.
Wait. With prepaid legal?
Yeah.
So I don't know if I just missed you saying this, but who was it that got you back into like the prepaid legal world? Was it the same guy as the first time?
No, it wasn't the same guy. Now with prepaid legal, like they used to have this, I don't know what it's like now, but they had this thing where you can go on the website and just tell them you're interested in being a distributor or whatever they call it. And they'll just have someone reach out to you.
I see.
Which I did.
Okay, so you sought them out this time.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, continue.
So, that happened. They sent this guy to me. Much older guy, like in his 70s, I think. He said he was a 6-figure earner in the business, that's what he said. But nevertheless, I signed up. And so after I signed up and we met up for the first time to actually discuss, I quote business, he gives me the whole drill. He's like, okay, man, take this sheet of paper and I want you to write down the names of, 50 people, like, well, first of all, I don't know 50 people. Okay. So just write down the names of like, however many people, and you know how that goes. They want you to call the people, harass them, leave voicemails or, talk them into it, all that good stuff. So this time I'm going extra hard. So, I mean, I wasn't going to mess up my job this time. Now I wasn't going to do that now, but this time I was spending money on, quote tools. I was doing that. Now this time, same things as before, going to job fairs, going like to public places to hand out brochures and business cards. This time, I'm, canvassing neighborhoods, knocking on doors, I'm doing all kind of stuff, man. Now I will admit that a little bit better. I mean, instead of signing up, a couple of people, maybe I signed up 5 people. So, but never enough to offset my costs, but it's like the whole time, it's like you're being fed this whole thing. Like, man, you can be doing better. You can be doing better.
Can you tell me also what were the costs in prepaid legal? Because the service itself is only $10 a month, but I'm guessing you're paying some sort of like monthly distributor membership, back office, something like that. So can you tell me what that was like? What the expenses were?
Okay, so it's hard to put a number on it now because I wasn't necessarily tracking it entirely back then. So the service fee for just the base service, which was the legal advice, that was like $10 a month. Then for the identity protection thing, that was, I forgot how much it was, but I think if I had to estimate, I think it came out to about 15 to $20 total, for both of those. But most of my money really went towards, tools and, marketing materials. And, this, by this time they had, you can, buy Facebook ads and, that's where a lot of my money was going towards promotion and stuff.
Got it.
So if I was spending a ridiculous amount of money doing that, I just put it like that, a ridiculous amount. So I would say I was definitely, putting in the work at this time, but I mean, wasn't getting that return on investment,
Right.
So it's like, no matter what I did, it's like, they like, well, you're not going hard enough, man. You're not going hard enough. Like, come on, man. You got to sign some people up, man, such and such. Now, the thing I realized about MLM this time, being that I had, some experience in life now, because my upline showed me like this video of like one of their seminars, and there was a guy on the video who claimed to make 500,000 a year, and so what I realized was that he's like, yeah, this guy, he also sells coaching and he sells tapes and he sells motivational, see. What I realized when he told me that was, I realized that the guys in the company who are really making money are the ones who sell tools. I'm like the ones who sell like the CDs, who host the seminars and the coaching, the mentoring. Those are the ones making the money.
Yep.
Is what I realized when he told me that. I'm like, oh man, like so I didn't get that deep into it this time. It's like, I pretty much made a promise to myself that I wasn't gonna go out the way I did last time. So I'm like, you know what, you did all that you could, man. And by this time I was in a relationship as well, and so, my girlfriend, she's telling me like, look, man, you did all you could, you went knocking on doors and stuff, and you spent money on Facebook ads, like, I mean, there's no shame in walking away, is what she told me in so many words, right? So, which I did, and that was my last stint in MLM, and if I had to guess how much I was down total, I would say at least $10,000 total from like, all of those stints in MLM. But the worst part of it for me was the mindset that I walked away with and the damage I had done to myself, from being in that mindset.
Absolutely. This is the thing that's so frustrating about it, is because that mental part of it is so unquantifiable. Like, how do you put a dollar value on a lost friendship or years of wasted time or a mindset shift or, professional manipulation to your mind that you now have to sort of undo? People go to therapy for this, for real. So, I mean, that's something where even if the FTC or whoever took one of these companies to court for being a scam or for being a pyramid scheme or whatever, it's like, it doesn't matter what dollar amount you put on restitution for the victims or people who lost money in it thinking that they were doing the right thing. And that's also another thing that complicates it too, not to go off on a tangent, but like, how do you decide who the money goes to? Does the money go to the distributors who are losing money but were themselves also perpetrating the scam? It's literally such a web of like, you can't work it out. So
Exactly.
and not only that, it's like whatever dollar amount did get assigned to the losses of people, it's never going to be enough to fix that. And now you're sitting here, it's 2025, you're saying it took you around 10 years to sort of come back from that. So yeah, if you're comfortable with it, tell me a bit about that and what that was like and how it sort of echoed on even after you had left.
Well, because like for a long time, like I said, I mean, I refused to, well, I won't say I refused, but It's like instead of going to get a job, I was hell bent on either making the MLM work or I was going to, do some business on my own, right? Now, at one point, I did, I mentioned earlier the internet marketing seminar, right? I mentioned that. So I did get into that eventually after I left the MLM. Let me see, around 2010 or so. Yeah. So I did get into that. And I did decent, enough to sustain myself. Now, it wasn't enough to get me all the way back to where I was, but it was enough for me to like, because where I was living with the family member, it was enough for me to say, okay, you know what, here's a few dollars, to thank you for letting me stay here. It was enough for that. And for me to yeah, like I said, look out for myself and whatnot. So I was hell bent on making that work. And that went on for a while. I mean, I was making something. I mean, on top of the unemployment payments I was getting as well. And so this went on for a minute until I eventually just said, just broke down and like I said, went back to being a wage slave, like so that took about, let me see. Now I forget the timeline for going back to get another job, which might have been around 2012, 13 or so. But even with that, it still took me a while to, yeah, like I said, to basically shake back, to get back to where I was eventually, because knowing what had happened before, I was still very skeptical about going out there on my own again, knowing what had happened before, like that pain of losing everything. So yeah, that's why it took me that long to shake back. Now, one thing I will say is that no matter how smart, no matter how rational a person normally is, if you can capitalize on these two emotions, then you can usually break down, that rational state of mind they have. It's like they can be sharp, doesn't matter. If you can capitalize on both fear and or their greed, then you can pretty much get what you want from them. Because the greed part of it, you start telling them, hey, you can make all this money, you can have this, you can have that, and unlimited amounts of money without, especially if you convince them they can do it without doing hardly any work. Are you serious? Oh yeah, you can definitely get them if you can convince them of that. So you're playing on their greed. On the flip side of it, if you play on their fear, in this case, the MLMs, they're telling you, hey, what if you lose your job? Or, what if one of your loved ones gets sick and you need to come up with some money or whatever, so those two emotions, fear and greed, those emotions are pretty much used to manipulate, mankind for the most part.
How did it affect you even afterwards when you're like, I'm not going to do MLM anymore, and you started to learn more and like realize actually, yeah, this was a scam. I did everything I could. How did it continue on in your head?
Okay. It didn't really, okay, how can I put this? The MLM part of it, I realized that for what it was. It's like, okay, from a financial standpoint, which is how I was thinking about it for a very long time, I'm like, this is a scam. By this time, like I say, I was thinking strictly about the financial side of it, about the MLMs. Like, okay, you lose money doing this, you lose time, well, you waste your time. And I was thinking about it strictly like that. And so it's like, from that perspective, it's like, you know what, don't waste your time ever again with this. All right. Let it go. Let it go. And that's how I looked at it. But I was still very much into that self-help material, like I had never let that stuff go up until this point, so I was still somewhat susceptible to it without realizing it and without knowing why necessarily. But then I came across the anti-MLM material, you, of course. I hope you don't mind me saying names, but came across you, Julie Anderson, Hannah, what's the one girl's name? I
Hannah
haven't seen
Alonso?
her in a while though, but yeah, her. I mean, it's several others I watched too, but those are the ones I can remember like right off the bat. So came across, a lot of y'all's material, and one thing I realized from listening to y'all was that there was a lot I didn't realize about this industry, and that how a lot of those thoughts lingered on without me realizing it, even though I was, very much done with it. And I realized like a lot of the self-help material is directly tied to the MLM industry. And when I heard, several people explain how that went, it made sense. It made sense when I was never that far away from it. So eventually I said, you know what, you got to let it go, man. The self-help stuff, you got to let it go. It's like, besides, do you really need a damn book for somebody telling you how to go out there and get what you need in life? Like, do you really need that? Do you really need somebody to tell you that, you think about something and, law of attraction? Like, do you really need all that kind of stuff? It's like, hell, I mean, you accomplish your goals the same way you accomplish anything else in life. Like, do you need a book? Do you need somebody telling you that you're better than other people because you choose to try to elevate yourself? Like, you don't need that. All right. You don't need that.
Right.
So I decided to let that go. And something else I started doing was, see, I didn't really realize like just how deep this thing went. I kind of thought of MLM eventually as being this silly thing. Like, it's like, okay, man, this is silly. But I did not realize like the political ties it had, like the psychological side of it, the money involved. I did not know all that stuff until I began to listen to y'all and began to do some of this research on my own. I went and read what's his name? Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, Robert Fitzpatrick.
Ponzi-nomics. I read that. So I began researching it myself, and I'm like, man, this thing goes a lot deeper than what I realized. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just say that it all made sense, once I started going down that rabbit hole to figure out like why, like I said earlier, why I was never really far away from it as long as I held on to a certain mindset.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And so I know a little spoiler because of your email and us talking before this, but was this the end of your MLM exposure?
All right. So my cousin calls me, says, hey, I have a business opportunity I want you to check out. You're gonna love it. Like, okay, me and my cousin, she's a college graduate, I'm doing well for herself and stuff. I'm always looking to, make money and stuff. So I'm like, okay, let me go check it out, man. See what she's talking about. I get there and it turns out to be an MLM for some travel company. Right. And so, I'm a guest, I'm just there to listen. And okay, they do the thing where people come across the stage, give their testimonies, tell their stories and stuff. And my cousin was telling me like, man, like almost everyone in this room is a millionaire. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. So one guy gets on stage, he tells his story. He says, he's like, yeah, my wife and I, we live in a $2.5 million house. We own a real estate franchise, a Remax franchise and whatnot. Like, okay, cool. Another guy, well, two guys get on stage. They're both in business together. They're like, yeah, we are, we're sports agents for professional athletes. So the short of what I'm saying is that I realized that a lot of the people in that room were actually, if they were rich indeed, like they say, it was from other businesses, not from that company. Because like I said, one guy, real estate guy, on the franchise. These guys are agents for professional athletes. There were a few other people who told similar stories as well when they got on stage, but they were all, they all made their money in other businesses. I caught on. Now, this time I caught on quick. And so, so my cousin, and one of the guys, they're like, hey, man, so are you going to sign up or what, man? Like, you know what? Not today, man. Not today. I'm going to go home. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to let you all know. So this time I couldn't go through with it this time, man. I couldn't. But the irony is that, I talked to this cousin like some years later. I mean, me and her, we're cool, but we don't talk that often though. So we talked a few years later after that. And that meeting came up and she was like, man, I can't believe I was scamming back then. I was like, nah, I'm like, man, I'm like, give yourself some grace. I'm like, you didn't know any better, man. You wasn't, She was like, no, I was scamming. That whole thing was a scam. I was like, oh, well, I mean, if you're going to put, I mean, she would not let me, she would not let me ease it up on her or nothing. She's like, no, I was scamming. All right.
Did you, when, like, after that meeting happened, did you try to, like, talk to her about it or talk her out of it?
To be honest with you, I didn't. Cause I mean, her thing was, she was hell bent on it. at that time, so knowing what I had knew previously, it's like, you know what, don't let it go, man. Let it go. Like at that phase, they got to find out for themselves.
Yeah, that's a really hard thing that I'm trying to put together some sort of method or even just support for people to try to approach those conversations better, because I totally understand when you recognize that somebody is so hell bent on it and they've sort of curved their personality towards this thing, because that's really what it can do. It can really change your entire personality. And you had been there once before, so you knew firsthand what that was like, and you saw it in her. I can understand why a lot of people would be like, you know what, it's better for me to just not say anything and let them figure it out the hard way, rather than me try to talk to them about it and risk losing them or potentially, having a falling out.
Exactly. And that's how I looked at it. And, it worked, it worked in this case because she eventually came around, per the conversation I was just telling you about. And she admitted herself. She was like, damn, I can't believe I was scamming.
So your experience culminated in this final pitch where you saw the legacy sort of being passed on, where you'd gone through your own journey of MLM and realized, you know what, this is not it. And now you're seeing your cousin in it. And I'm guessing that based on what you had learned, you never got back into it again. But I think that story with your cousin serves more to point out something that's still such a big problem, which is that even after people learn the hard lesson about MLM in their own life, we still have to be considerate of the next generation. Or, we got to think about our little nieces and nephews, our cousins, our kids. Like if you're a person who's 40 years old, it's very feasible that you have like a 10-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid. In a few years, it sneaks up quicker than you'd expect. In a few years, that kid could be getting prospected to, join Amway or something like that. So,
Yep.
yeah, I really do appreciate you sharing your story, because I know it can be rough, but I think you're 100% right with what you said, which is that maybe it can help somebody. I'll tell you for a fact that it does help people watching these interviews with folks who have had their own experience. It absolutely does help people, because we can watch and see this guy's not crazy. This guy's not some, evil, vindictive guy. He's not a hater. He's not trying to tear anybody down. He's just offering a cautionary tale based on his own experience. And unfortunately, it's a experience that millions of people have every single year. And we still have work to do when it comes to getting people to look beyond themselves a little bit. When people get out of it, there's, oh, that was a scam, lesson learned. But I would really love to see more people try to not just take the lesson for themselves, but try to impart the lesson on others so that they don't, make the same mistakes. I think that's all we can do, really, is try to make the younger people in our lives have an easier time than we did.
And I agree. And one thing I'll say is that, up until recently, the MLM thing had kind of faded. Well, not faded, but it's something that I didn't really pay much attention to, as that part of my life, really. But again, the fact that I was still ODing on the self-help material, like I said, it still wasn't that far away. But you're right. I never did, I never dealt with it again. But that's when, like I said, I went on this detox by consuming you all's, videos and stuff, to where it's like, you know what? Not only is it a waste of your time, it's also, like I said, it's a psychological thing, because that's really why I'm here today. I mean, the money side of it, yeah, if I could get that money back, that would be that'll be cool, but whatever. But it's really the psychological damage that I'm here for, because for me to detox on that end, to realize, like, look, man, like you were saying, you're not crazy, for want to try it so many times. And it's like, no, it's designed that way. Like it's designed to be cult-like, because if it wasn't designed in that cult-like way, then people wouldn't stick around, because a cult is designed to, basically disable your rational thoughts. You're supposed to like think in terms of the group, like I said, disable your individuality, so when it gets like that, you don't look at things rationally anymore. And that's how you justify staying, so. And like I said, and one thing I wanted to say also was that from the psychological perspective, the reason why that attitude I described earlier, oh man, you're a loser, blah blah blah, being a lot of them, they tend to target people at times who, because I would say when I was younger, I struggled socially, right? I struggled socially, and I carried a lot of animosity with me for that reason. Like, mad at the world and, F these people. And so my attitude, is like, I guess they knew how to play on that. So it's like, okay, you go out here, you get rich, you can get back at those people, now you're better than them, and you can call them losers and tell them they'll never be anything. And, you know, it appeals to people like that, who like I said, people who may have struggled socially like I did, and who want to, one up on the world and anyone else who may have caused them pain. So yeah, it's the psychological stuff that really has me here.
Well, I do really appreciate you sharing your story, man, and I think it will be helpful to people for sure, because I'm not trying to sell people some fairy tale answer outside of MLM. If you avoid getting scammed by MLM or any other type of scam, life is still going to have challenges. Life is still hard. Everybody deals with, financial problems, personal problems, family problems. That's why even I think the term financial freedom is kind of funny, because I think most people who actually end up making a lot of money, their lifestyle cost of living inflates to match it. Like right now, if you just suddenly started making $1 million a month, do you think you would live in the same apartment and drive the same car? Probably not. You'd probably be eating steak and lobster every day for the first little bit, driving a crazy expensive car, living in a crazy place. And now it would end up feeling the same, this like hedonic treadmill of constantly pursuing the next best thing. So I'm not telling people that they should try to not have any money or not make any money. I'm just trying to say, like, any dollar you don't put into multi-level marketing is a dollar better spent on literally anything else. So,
you know what? Let me speak on that right quick. I guess what you just described can be called cost of living inflation. I guess, like, when you start making more money, you spend more money. Let me speak on that right quick. And see, in a lot of cases, to lure you into an MLM, if you start making that kind of money, like you said, that's going to happen, because to even lure you into these things, like what they'll usually do, notice how it's always strictly material things they use to lure you in, right? It's always about, you can make enough money to buy you a big house, to buy you a fancy car, to, eat at fancy restaurants and, ride yachts. Like that's always what they sell you in order to bring you in. So of course, they tell you, like, cut out pictures of magazines and, put them on your wall, and, pictures of your dream car, put those everywhere so you see it at all times, that kind of stuff. So of course, if you start making that kind of money, that's what you're in it for. So like you said, that cost of living, that's going to go up as well. And like you say, do you think you're really going to be any better off? You're probably still going to be living paycheck to paycheck technically. So yeah, just driving home your point a little bit further.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. I don't know what else to say, but don't join an MLM.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. Because like I said, I'm going to reiterate this point. It's not just the financial damage it does to you, nor the waste of time. It's really the psychological thing. It's really the potential loss of relationships. Because I'm still, even though I'm saying what I'm saying right now, and I know, about the political history of it and, all that good stuff, I'm still doing what I can right now to basically shake the psychological side of it right now as we speak. I'm still dealing with that, which is one of the reasons why I chose to come on this show, to put this out there. It's like, so if I speak on it publicly, tell my story, not only will I help somebody, I feel like it helps me to actually say it, because I don't talk about this. I've been embarrassed to tell this story. There are going to be some people who know me in real life who are going to watch this, and they're going to be like, man, you never told me about this. I bet you.
It is super important that you shared your story, and I really do appreciate it. So thank you for doing this, because yeah, it can be embarrassing. It is hard for people to talk about. So I thank you so much for sharing with me, for sure.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, man.